Let's get right into it. Welcome to this explainer where we're plunging straight into the absolute chaos and, frankly, the intense partisanship of the early American Republic. When we picture the nation's founding, it's so easy to imagine this unified group of men working together in perfect harmony. But the reality? It was incredibly messy. Today, we're unpacking the struggles of this era, really looking at the immense burden of power carried by our second president, John Adams, and how his turbulent relationship with his friend-turned-rival, Thomas Jefferson, shaped the nation. So, here's a question for you. How exactly does a founding father go from being a celebrated national hero to a bitterly defeated one-term president? It's pretty dramatic, right? Adams was literally a titan of the revolution. Yet, his presidency? It was completely bogged down by foreign extortion, undeclared wars at sea, and just massive domestic paranoia. To really grasp this shift and to understand how his eventual defeat to Thomas Jefferson fundamentally rewired the country, we have to look closely at the weight of the power he was holding. All right, part one, architect of American government. Let's look at how things started. Now, long before the bitter, nasty partisanship of his presidency, Adams was actually the loudest voice for separation from Great Britain. In fact, he famously recruited a young Thomas Jefferson to be the one to author the Declaration of Independence. But Adams wasn't just a hype man. He was literally blueprinting the Republic. Back in 1776, in his Thoughts on Government, he proposed this totally revolutionary system: 3 separate branches, an executive, a bicameral legislature, and an independent judiciary. Sound familiar? Yeah, that framework heavily influenced the Constitution we are literally still using today. And his resume was just off the charts. Adams went on these dizzying, high-stakes diplomatic missions all across Europe just to secure American independence. He traveled to France, where, by the way, Thomas Jefferson would also step in and make a massive mark as minister, and then on to Britain and Holland. Ultimately, Adams was the absolute crucial piece in negotiating the 1783 Treaty of Paris, which officially put an end to the Revolutionary War. Moving on to Part 2, the XYZ affair and the breakdown of trust. So, picture this. It's 1797. Adams just assumed the presidency, and Europe is entirely engulfed in war. The U.S. had just signed the Jay Treaty with Britain, which totally enraged France. They felt America was stabbing their old revolutionary ally in the back. So Adams sends a delegation to Paris to try and avoid a full-blown war, but they get approached by 3 shadowy French agents known only as X, Y, and Z. And get this, before any official negotiations could even start, these agents tried to extort the Americans. They demanded a massive low-interest loan for France, the assumption of merchant claims, a 50,000-pound personal bribe for their minister, and a formal apology from President Adams. I mean, just outrageous demands. Well, the American response to this blatant extortion attempt became legendary. The rallying cry was, "Millions for defense, but not a penny for tribute." And when Adams actually went ahead and published these dispatches, it sent absolute shockwaves across the country. The public rejection of this bribe practically turned Adams into an overnight hero back home. For a brief moment, it actually united a very fractured American public against this massive insult from France. Which brings us to Part 3, the quasi-war crisis. That diplomatic slap in the face, combined with the fact that the French Navy was seizing over 300 American merchant ships, plunged the U.S. straight into what's known as the Quasi-War. This was essentially an undeclared naval war fought between 1798 and 1800. The battles happened mostly down in the Caribbean, targeting those incredibly lucrative shipping lanes. Even without a formal declaration of war, this was highly destructive, and it seriously threatened both America's vital maritime trade and its actual sovereignty as a new nation. To counter this massive threat, Adams kicked off a rapid mobilization. First up, he pushed Congress to formally establish the Department of the Navy. They started launching warships like the famous USS Constellation, which actually scored some crucial early victories. Second, Congress totally suspended all commerce with France. And third, they officially annulled the old 1778 alliance treaties. It was like Adams was walking a razor's edge, desperately trying to negotiate peace while urgently gearing up for war. But amidst all this intense geopolitical pressure, we can't forget the human element. Abigail Adams, who was affectionately and sometimes critically called Mrs. President, was John's closest confidant. She wasn't just a spouse, she was a brilliant stateswoman in her own right who fiercely defended him against these vicious partisan attacks. But managing his informal affairs and weathering all those political storms, it took a really heavy toll on her. The stress was so immense, it actually led to a near-fatal illness for her in the summer of 1798. Okay, part 4. The bitter election of 1800. So take all that foreign war stress, combine it with the domestic turmoil, and you get the perfect boiling cauldron for a fierce power struggle. It came down to John Adams versus his own vice president, Thomas Jefferson, and the country was completely split between two very different visions. The Federalists, led by Adams, really favored closer ties with Britain, commercial trade, and a strong central government. But on the flip side, Jefferson's Democratic Republicans favored France, and they prioritized states' rights, envisioning this agrarian society led by yeoman farmers. And the thing is, each side genuinely, truly believed the other was going to destroy the republic. And the campaign attacks? Absolutely brutal. If you think modern politics is nasty, just look at this. Partisan newspapers completely pulled no punches. Adams was smeared as a monarchist and Anglophile, and some even labeled him legally insane. Jefferson, meanwhile, was attacked as this dangerous Francophile radical and an atheist who was going to bring the bloody chaos of the French Revolution right to American shores. And as if that wasn't enough, Adams was even dealing with deep sabotage from guys inside his own party. Now, because of a quirky flaw in the original Constitution about how electoral votes were cast, we ended up with a tie. Thomas Jefferson and his running mate Aaron Burr both got exactly 73 votes. Adams finished third with 65. This totally unexpected tie created a bizarre and terrifying constitutional crisis, right at the exact moment the young nation was trying to pull off its very first real transfer of power. It took 36 ballots. Just let that sink in for a second. 36 grueling rounds of voting in the House of Representatives over several incredibly tense days in February 1801, just to finally break the tie and elect Thomas Jefferson. During this whole deadlock, state militias were literally mobilizing. There were very real rumors of civil war and assassination plots. What Jefferson would later call the Revolution of 1800 was ultimately successful, but man, it pushed the country right to the absolute brink of collapse. Which leads us into part 5, the legacy of John Adams. Devastated by the political loss and the heartbreaking recent death of his son, Adams actually quietly slipped out of Washington in the pre-dawn hours before Jefferson's inauguration. But his final presidential act was arguably his greatest. With the Convention of 1800, Adams secured a peace treaty that finally ended the quasi-war with France. He made the ultimate political sacrifice. He chose an unpopular peace over a politically popular war. It completely cost him his re-election, but it kept the nation intact. And in this brilliant twist of history, it was this exact peace that paved the way for President Thomas Jefferson to safely negotiate the Louisiana Purchase just a few years later. Before he left office, though, Adams made one final, monumental chess move. He would later write, "My gift of John Marshall to the people of the United States was the proudest act of my life." By passing the Judiciary Act of 1801, Adams appointed Marshall as Chief Justice. This effectively cemented the Federalist legacy in the courts, ensuring that the federal judiciary would grow into a powerful, co-equal branch of government for decades to come. So I'll leave you with this to consider. If extreme partisanship, newspaper smears, and foreign meddling could nearly destroy the founders' vision way back in 1800, what does that say about the monumental achievement of that first peaceful transfer of power? It's a stark reminder that our political systems have always been kind of fragile, yet at the same time incredibly resilient. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this gives you a new perspective on the incredible burden of power in America's earliest days.